recount their experiences with concussion. Then each of their experiences are then explained by experts in the field. The book is called Concussion cérébrale, des personnalités témoignent, des scientifiques expliquent. David Ellenberg is a neuropsychologist who helped put this project together. Congratulations on the book. It's really very, very interesting.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was a collective effort that I did with the journalist, well-known journalist Diane Sauvé, and two colleagues, William Archambault and Véronique Sicard, because we know that there are no two concussions that are alike. Everybody has a very different experience, and throughout the years, I've presented a lot of information regarding the science behind concussion. But what I realize is that people need to see how people cope with these concussions, and we thought it was a way to to reach out to those folks in their homes who are living this experience in isolation, to be able to see how others have dealt with it.
It's interesting too, because you mentioned the isolation, because they don't understand what they're going through. Families don't understand what they're going through. Each individual you interview are allowed to ask questions, of their experience. And the one that keeps coming up over and over again is, am I ever going to be the same again? Is this going to come back? And that seems to be that sort of overriding fear, isn't it?
That is the fear that comes up, absolutely. You've pinpointed it. People are afraid that later on it might come back as their brains will age, because we know there is some evidence that people who've suffered several concussions in their youth could have a more rapidly aging brain in their 50s and in their 60s. But it's not the case for many of the participants here who had mainly just one concussion. Another thing that I really want to highlight is that, yes, we have well-known personalities who are football players, hockey players, Olympic athletes, but we also have artists, we have journalists. So because we know concussions touch everyone, not just athletes. In fact, in clinical practice, a bigger chunk of my practice is with everyday people who are not necessarily high-level athletes.
And I guess those people are even more isolated, because athletes, they understand that's part of what happens when they play their games. When you're dealing with people like journalists and artists, they're just not expecting to have a concussion.
Yes, absolutely. They don't understand the changes that they're going through. If I think of the international photographer, Heidi Hollinger, her first symptoms appeared about 2.5 days after her initial injury. So at first she didn't even know what was going on. And then people around her didn't understand. And if I think of Heidi, one thing that was pretty hard for her was her children not understanding what she was going through. So she was, the boring mother who wouldn't do any activities anymore because she had so suffering in her symptoms, and that made her feel guilt, a huge guilt, not to be able to be the mother that she wanted to be. And again, Heidi, like many others, had a hard time finding answers to their questions. And this is what we hope to bring with this book.
The other thing that's interesting, too, is this is one of the few physical injuries that really has mental health implications.
Absolutely, at different levels. One, chemically, cognitively, we know that the parts of the brain that are affected by the concussion are these frontal regions that are centered to emotional regulation. So indeed, people who suffer concussions, a certain percentage will have a hard time having access to their emotions, or will be overexplosive, and we know that there's a high degree of depression associated with it. And that's one factor. The other factor is when you don't recognize yourself, when you're afraid that you'll never be the person you used to be, well, that has its toll also on your emotional balance, and that can cause anxiety and depression. So these two factors really build up and have a huge toll, and that, again, that's what these 10 personalities, they wanted to break this isolation and to give hope and to give strategies to everyone who are going through this, and also to help the families and friends around who don't understand their beloved ones ones who are going through a concussion to allow them to see what really is happening.
But there is no real one good strategy, is there? I mean, everybody has different experiences, and everybody seems to find their own way to fight their way back and cope.
Absolutely. We see that everyone had their own tricks, their own strategies, whether it's exercise, nutrition, meditation. But one thing came through each one, and I wasn't expecting this, and it's that each of these personalities said that the factor that helped them the most was to be able to have someone who went through it before to give them advice, to listen to them, and to give them unconditional care. And this mentorship seems to be such a big part of their recovery process. And this really came through each of these, each of the 10 personalities, what they expressed and what they've been through.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but not everybody is lucky enough to have a mentor, and I think this book goes a long way to help share some of the experiences. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much for having me.